Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michaela Crimmins, and I'm a program manager with the Foundation Alumni Engagement. On behalf of the URI Foundation Alumni Engagement and the Women's Leadership Council, we welcome you to today's event, Leadership Through Global Citizenship. The Women's Leadership Council is celebrating Women's History Month with an inspirational series of alumni presentations on leadership, global citizenship, networking, and more. We are so thrilled to welcome Mary Ellen Lynch from the class of 1997 as our third speaker in the series. We are also excited to have Beth Boulerice, class of 1987, and a member of the Women's Leadership Council, act as our moderator for the event. And at this time, I would like to pass it over to Beth.
Thank you, Michaela. Hello, everyone. I am Beth Boulerice. As Michaela mentioned, I'm from the class of 1987. I got a degree in accounting from URI, and I am a member of the URI Women's Leadership Council. I'm very excited to be here today to celebrate Women's History Month with an engaging conversation with Mary Ellen Lynch. Mary Ellen earned her Bachelor's of Arts degree in Political Science from the University of Rhode Island in 1997. And she is founder of Mary Ellen Lynch Consulting. Her mission is to inspire positive change by helping individuals and communities integrate global citizenship into schools, businesses, and organizations to enhance impact. Through workshops and engagement initiatives, Mary Ellen makes the concept of global citizenship practical for real life by connecting people to their own impact. Mary Ellen is an adjunct professor at Quinebaug Valley Community College and Roger Williams University. Her efforts to integrate global citizenship education into curriculum have been nationally recognized. Today she will share what it means to be a global citizen, connecting strengths and passion to empower individuals and communities. She will teach us how global citizenship can be applied to all facets of life and how what you do in your own community can have a global impact. Mary Ellen, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and our audience. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you, Beth, for the introduction. So I was in 4th grade when I met Jane. Jane had just moved from Poland to my hometown of Holyoke, Massachusetts. When Jane came to school, she rarely smiled. I couldn't imagine what it would be like to live in a new country, not speak the language, and start a new school. I wanted to understand what it must be like for Jane. Jane sat next to me in class, so I tried talking to her to help her feel welcome. She didn't speak English, so I asked my parents to buy me a Polish dictionary. I learned some Polish words and lended the dictionary to Jane so she could translate Polish words into English. We started to form a connection, and soon we were getting in trouble for talking during class. Jane was quite serious, but I knew she understood me when she laughed or smiled. My world got bigger when I met Jane. The story of meeting Jane has had an undercurrent throughout my life. It's my first memory of feeling empathy and connecting across cultures. I didn't realize it then, but I know now that my strength of empathy was driving my interest to try to walk in Jane's shoes. I believe that this experience transformed how I saw the world and sparked my lifelong curiosity to engage across cultures. I'm fortunate to have had the opportunity to live in Costa Rica during graduate school. Throughout my stay, I became captivated by the local phrase, pura vida, which is used to say hello and goodbye. But it's also a way of life to convey feelings of peace, happiness, gratitude, and positivity. The expression resonated with me then and has inspired me ever since. To this day, the story of Jane and the Pura Vida mantra drives Mary Ellen Lynch Consulting's mission to foster global citizenship. Because I truly believe that we can build a more sustainable and meaningful world when we use our strengths and passions to make an impact on others in our communities. This story highlights the value and global perspective that I offer and bring to my work and relationships. Thank you for listening to my story. My name is Mary Ellen Lynch, and I'm excited to be here with you all today to talk about leadership through global citizenship.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Can you tell us more about the mission of Mary Ellen Lynch Consulting and the concept of global citizenship?
Of course. So global citizenship is a very broad term. There's no universal definition because it's really a way of life. So the concept dates back to the 4th century BCE among Greek philosophers. But in its current ideation, iteration, its foundation is in the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. As in the preamble, it states that it recognizes equal rights for members of the human family. Continuing with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which I'll talk about shortly. But really what it means is recognizing that what we do in our daily lives have implications beyond our local community. It exists in many different contexts, which I'll talk about shortly. And there's no single framework, although I'll talk about some most commonly used frameworks shortly. But I also like to tell what it's not. So global citizenship is not telling people what to do or how to think. It's not necessarily having to travel abroad. It's not necessarily philanthropy, and it's not limited to the classroom. So really my vision is to bring global citizenship beyond the classroom in my consultancy work. I'll talk about it more later, but I take a strengths-based approach to global citizenship to make it more practical for folks. Really in an effort to build other people up and to help people understand how when we apply our strengths and passion, we can really make a difference in the world. And I really believe that when we are more actively engaged in our communities, using our strengths and passion, we're happier as individuals and resulting in stronger communities. What inspired me to launch Mary Ellen Lynch Consulting is, as Beth mentioned, I'm an adjunct professor at Roger Williams University in Quinnipiac Community College. I teach courses in community development, global migration. I teach public speaking. And I incorporate components of global citizenship education into curriculum. And what I've found is that, and my students are learners of all ages. And what I've found is that the concept of global citizenship has really resonated with my students who, again, are of all ages. And in incorporating this type of curriculum, which I'll get to in a little bit, it really develops an urge to respond among my students and want to really engage in their communities. So that really inspired me to take the concept of global citizenship beyond the classroom to the wider community through my consulting.
And maybe we can just take a step back and just see by a show of hands if how many people have actually heard of global citizenship before, or is this a new concept? And I think you can they vote, Michaela, on the screen?
Yes, so with the reactions, if you do like maybe a thumbs up if you've heard about it before.
So it looks like quite a few of you have heard of it before. So that's good, Mary Ellen, but what does it really mean to be a global citizen?
Yeah, so that's the unique thing, is that I like to reinforce that there's no universal definition. So it's really up to us how we act. So I believe that we're all global citizens. It's up to us to integrate that approach in our lives. So for me, it's really about applying first of all, understanding what our strengths are and applying those in an intentional way to make a positive impact, whether it's in our personal lives, at work, at school. But what it looks like is different for everybody. It's really also understanding that the choices we make every day have implications, again, beyond our local community. For example, the clothes that we buy. So one initiative I'll talk about later that I'm working on with a global partner is a course in sustainable fashion to help others be mindful of, where they buy their clothes and make that connection of the local and global. So it's different for everybody. I really encourage people to understand their strengths and apply their strengths and their passions to make a positive impact.
And as a professor, how do you integrate this into the curriculum?
Yeah, great question. So I'm actually I have a few slides that I wanted to pull up to give folks some visuals. Fast forwarding. In 2015, UN world leaders adopted the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and they're all here on the slide. World leaders committed to making progress in the area of inequalities, eradicating poverty and climate change through these goals by 2030. So I use this as a framework in my courses, helping students engage in projects that address these goals. How I integrate it into my curriculum. So UNESCO leads the global stage in global citizenship education. So in SDG 4, quality education, there's actually a target that says that the international community has committed to ensuring quality education and promoting lifelong learning for all. So how they do this is using global citizenship as a framework, and that's what I use in the classroom. So so as I mentioned earlier, there's no one single framework for global citizenship. There's many different frameworks. The one that I use the most is Oxfam International. This is their framework that you see here on the slide. This outlines knowledge, skills, and attitudes that we all need, learners of ages all need to engage with the world. So for example, building empathy, having appreciation for diversity, being able to communicate effectively. So this framework I use in my classes, and how I do this is with a project-based learning approach, engaging students in projects to explore global issues in their local context so that they're developing these skills, knowledge, values, and attitudes through this experiential learning.
Well, that's really interesting. Sounds like a great class. I know that you've traveled to Costa Rica in the past, particularly when you were working on your master's in international education development at BU. And you were conducting research for your thesis to assist with enhancing access to education in rural communities. What inspired you to travel to Costa Rica in the first place?
Great question. And it goes back to URI. And here is just a photo of myself in Costa Rica. I thought since it's Women's History Month, I wanted to share a photo of the woman that was my second family there in Costa Rica, and that I lived with and were a support network for me during my stay in Costa Rica. But actually, it was after URI that I first went to Costa Rica on a service learning trip with URI professor David Avedon. I had known about the trip when I was at URI and didn't have a chance to participate in the trip when I was at URI. So it was after I graduated from URI that I participated in this experiential learning trip with URI professor David Avedon and went to Costa Rica for a week, and we lived with families in a remote coffee farming area. And we lived with families who their livelihood was dependent on coffee farming. And what I observed on that first trip with the URI group and living with these families is that because of poor roads, there wasn't always secondary schools in the rural communities. For adolescents, they really had to go to the bigger cities to go to school. So many of them didn't have the opportunity to go to school and would work on their family's farm. So it inspired me to go back and do my thesis on child labor and providing more educational opportunities for adolescents in these rural communities so that they could still, work on their family's farm, because certainly that was cultural and part of their culture to help their family on the farm. But I wanted them to have the choice and the opportunity to go to school, if they chose to. So I developed a learning program to integrate more schools into the rural communities so that adolescents had the opportunity to go to school.
Sounds like
that was a URI trip that inspired me to go back.
Yeah, it sounds like a fantastic opportunity. And sounds like you really immersed yourself in the culture, which is great. So how did that shape you and influence your career path?
So that trip inspired me to, when I was in grad school, we had to do a thesis project, and that inspired me to focus it on secondary schooling in these rural communities. When I was at URI, I majored in political science with a minor in Spanish. I loved learning Spanish. What I found, though, was that to really learn language, for me personally, it really took for me to go and immerse myself in the culture to learn the language. So, minoring in Spanish, connecting with Professor Abaddon at the time, inspired me to travel to Costa Rica after URI and then go on to focus my graduate studies on child labor and secondary education in Costa Rica.
That's great. And then I guess you also worked in refugee resettlement, in the refugee resettlement field for about 8 years. Mm-hmm. And, what inspired you to work with refugees, and how do you incorporate that experience in your current work?
So when I was in graduate school, my classmate at the time was working with refugees in Boston. And through hearing her talk about her experience, it really inspired me to pursue working with refugees. So when I moved from Boston to Rhode Island, I started working with Dorcas International Institute of Rhode Island, working with refugees, helping them find employment, and then growing with the organization to then manage the volunteer and intern program, and then as community outreach director. I loved working with the refugee community. My favorite part of the job was going out and doing workshops to talk to people about refugees and the work of Dorcas International Institute. So that teaching aspect is what inspired me to then embark on a teaching career. So now I'm fortunate to use my strengths as a teacher and also teach the courses that I really love. And I love sharing that knowledge of working with refugees with my students.
So is that something that people like us can get involved in and assist in becoming a better global citizen?
Absolutely. So it's interesting you said that, Beth, because after grad school, I envisioned, working abroad. But what I realized is I can work with the international community right here in Rhode Island, working with the refugee community, for example. And there's so many organizations in Rhode Island that do global work. So that's, I think, we can still help the international community here in Rhode Island, supporting these organizations that do global work. And yes, and I'm also on the board of Women's Refugee Care, an organization that empowers women refugees. So many different organizations supporting refugees that people can get involved with locally here in Rhode Island.
Yeah, that sounds great. And your degree from URI, and we all love URI, obviously, all of us on the call today. And what did you think with your degree from URI and poli-sci and Spanish, and in your experience playing on the URI lacrosse team, how did that prepare you for your career endeavors?
Great question. So especially playing lacrosse in particular. So I had transferred to URI, so I was new to the school. I always played sports, so I wanted to foster my love of sports, but I also wanted to meet new people. So I joined the lacrosse team. I had never played lacrosse in my life, but it was the best decision because I learned new skills. I got out of my comfort zone. I made lifelong friendships from playing lacrosse. But what I learned is, to try new things. And I think that has worked for me in my career. I switched careers, as I mentioned. I worked in the nonprofit field for many years, but then switched careers and embarked on a teaching career, and now with my consultancy work. So I think transferring to URI, and then joining the lacrosse team, playing lacrosse for the first time and trying something new was a skill that now I still use and take with me. And it's helped me throughout my career to remind myself to, get out of my comfort zone. It's good to try new things and take risks.
Right, exactly. Well, that sounds great. And so then can you tell us more about the Mary Ellen Lynch Consulting initiatives that you promote and what you're doing?
So so for me to really help people understand and make global citizenship practical for real life, it's important for me to engage people in engagement initiatives and to help recognize other people for the efforts that they're doing to strengthen their communities. So one initiative that we've launched with Mary Ellen Lynch Consulting is our Global Shaper Spotlight Instagram Live series. And here is, so Reka is our guest actually tomorrow. She's going to be talking about how she uses her strengths of multicultural marketing to unite stories of cultural identity. What I'm trying to do with this series is bring on people who are connecting their strengths and what they're really passionate about to use that to make a positive impact in their communities. So another initiative that we're working on is developing this sustainable fashion course. So Nazreen Sheikh, who you see here on the slide, she was our first guest on the Instagram Live series. I actually met her on a trip to Nepal. She, growing up, worked in a sweatshop in Nepal. And now, because of that experience, empowers women and started her own nonprofit to advocate for women's empowerment and end child labor. So we're working, her and I, because she's on the ground working in the field, we're going to develop a course to help encourage companies to be more transparent about their practices and where their clothes are made, to inform the consumer, so that we, as active global citizens, can be more mindful of where we buy our clothes, for example. So this is one initiative. So a quote by Nazreen here on this slide is, use the beauty that you already have in your life to make a difference on the people who have nothing. And that really, again, I take to make global citizenship practical for real life, I use a strengths-based approach. Because I truly believe that when we understand our strengths and apply them in a way that makes a positive impact on others in our communities, we're ultimately going to be happier individually and then resulting in stronger communities. So two of the recent initiatives are the Global Shaper Spotlight series to feature folks who are applying their strengths for good, and the Sustainable Fashion course, which I'm really excited to be partnering with a URI TMD student to share her expertise in that area. So those are some exciting initiatives in the works.
Yeah, that sounds really exciting. So is Nazreen, is she in Nepal?
She is. She's in Nepal. She also has a sister organization in Portland, Oregon. So she's in the States often, but she's based in Nepal. And I had the opportunity to visit her organization when I was there.
That's awesome. And then, you talk about these small actions that we can do as individuals. You're mentioning the clothes and where we get our clothes. Can you give us more examples of like the personal choices and decisions that we make as individuals that have an impact?
Yeah, absolutely. So a big part, another part of what we do at Mary Ellen Lynch Consulting is facilitating cultural competency training. So it's how we treat others. So it's not just where we buy our clothes, our coffee. It's also how we engage with others and how we treat others, and being open to other perspectives. So we work with different organizations and schools to facilitate workshops in cultural competency to help people enhance intercultural communication skills. So I teach public speaking, so I integrate, and that's the beauty of global citizenship in academia, is it really applies across disciplines, especially with environmental studies, for example. Understanding our actions, so recycling, right? Something small, but something we can do more of to make an impact, because the environment, global warming impacts us all. So recycling is an example of something we can do more of. But Public speaking, again, I integrate global citizenship into my public speaking courses to really reinforce the importance of effective communication and empowering us to share our ideas and values to make change in issues that we're passionate about.
That's yeah, that sounds great. And then, you know, like the recycling is just a small thing that people can really do. That's really easy. It's not hard to do. You just hope that when they pick it up at the end of the day, it is being recycled and it's going to the right place. You know, that's something that, you know, we can't really do that much about. You know, but you know, can you also tell us how we can make the concept of global citizenship practical, though, for real life?
Yeah, and getting back to that question too, another example of how our small actions. So Sen is another individual I've featured on Global Shaper Spotlight. He's a yoga and meditation instructor. So he really believes that, the quote is there on the slide, teaching yoga and meditation for a sound mind and healthy body brings a positive outlook in one's inward and outward. So through the established peacefulness within, one can spread out peace and harmony at a global level. So he uses his passion for teaching yoga and meditation to promote inner and global peace. So that's an example of how we can, you know, use our strengths and passion to really make a difference. But to make it more practical in our real life, so I work with organizations and schools to, for example, integrate global citizenship into curriculum to help students develop these skills that they need to really thrive in an interconnected world. I work with organizations to integrate it into their workplace culture. One tool to do that is integrating strengths. So I'm a strengths coach with Leadership Rhode Island. And what we've found is many companies who've incorporated strengths into their workplace found that, you know, employees, when they understand their strengths and know their place in the organization, are more productive and feel more fulfilled. So in particular, so there's two assessments that I use in the classroom. It's the VIA survey of character strengths, which help people understand their value strengths, and then the Clifton strengths. That's the assessment I use with Leadership Rhode Island. That helps people understand their talent strengths. So this is one tool that I use to help people make it more practical for their real life, for their daily life, whether it's in their personal life, at work, or at school. But in particular, I think it can be effective for individuals to learn their strengths, but also in an organization to help people understand, you know, if they're in the right position for them and if they're feeling fulfilled in their work.
Are you seeing an increase from businesses that are interested in this kind of concept? Given the way ESG is such a prominent thing in today's society and growing, that I would think something like this, the strength assessments, would be something that companies would really want to have part of their organization.
So I know from my experience working and volunteering as a strengths coach with Leadership Rhode Island, Leadership Rhode Island has found an increase in employee engagement across Rhode Island in companies where they have incorporated strengths. From my own experience using strengths as a tool, I've seen a difference in particular in the classroom. So when my students take the strengths assessment, sometimes I have a lot of students who say, I'm not good at anything. I don't have strengths. So seeing them understand and recognize their strengths is really rewarding. And then seeing them actually, seeing their strengths inform their career choices is really rewarding. To, you know, find a job where they, you know, can use their strengths, because ultimately they're going to be happier and more fulfilled in doing so. So I've seen the benefits in the classroom. I've seen students be more confident as public speakers in my public speaking class once they understand their strengths. So I've found it very effective myself personally.
Right, that sounds great. And, you know, just you know, on a side note, because we're starting to run out of time, just want to know what makes URI special to you?
Yeah. Excellent question. So many reasons. The relationships I built there, especially from playing lacrosse, the lifelong friends I've made from playing lacrosse, the skills I've learned. You know, I fell in love with Rhode Island when I went to URI so much that I live here now. And Rhode Island is my home now. And it was definitely because of going to school there. I loved the fact that it was the perfect size school for me. I loved the professors in the political science department. That was my major. I loved the major of political science because it taught me a lot about life in general, but it's a field of study that I feel like I can apply to different parts of life. And it's broad in that sense. But I think in particular, the lifelong relationships I've made, and again, going back to that trip to Costa Rica I took with URI, that really informed my career choice and inspired me to really pursue a career in education and community engagement. Great.
And, for women that might be wanting to pursue a career in social entrepreneurship, what kind of advice can you give them?
Yeah, I say it's to keep moving forward. It takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. My consultancy is something I continue to grow. Stay true to your mission. Everything, my consultancy is at the core is global citizenship. So stay true to your mission. For me, taking risks has helped. And I think just being willing to get out of your comfort zone and try new things, all those things have helped me. But I think, being a social entrepreneur isn't easy because, it takes a lot of, networking and collaboration, and it takes time to build your brand and to really develop those relationships. So just keep moving forward.
Well, that sounds great. And can you tell the audience where they could find more information about your offerings?
Yes. So my information is here, my email. Please check out my website. Like us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, especially Instagram for our Global Shapers Spotlight. We have one tomorrow at noon with Rika Gibbons. So you can follow my Instagram page for information about future Global Shapers Spotlight series.
So they could go to your Instagram page, take a screenshot of this with your camera, and they could go to sign up for tomorrow's Instagram, right?
Yeah, and for the Instagram Live, people don't have to sign up. They can just join the session at noon tomorrow.
Okay, great. That sounds wonderful. Well, we're running out of time. We want to get to Q&A here. So thank you, Mary Ellen. This was such a powerful conversation, and I think we are all learning something from this today. We have about 25 minutes left, and we want to make sure that anyone who has questions, they can ask them. So what you need to do is you can go to the chat feature and write in your questions, and then we will get to them for Mary Ellen.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you, Mary Ellen. That was a great talk. And thank you, Beth, for moderating. So inspiring. And I also want to say we will send out a follow-up email, and we can also include this information that's on the slide as well for more resources. To learn more about, the subject and connect with you. And I think it's great that they can connect on Instagram too. So yeah, if you feel free to type in your questions in the chat, or, if you're more comfortable saying them out loud, go right ahead. But we do have, 20 minutes or so until we have to wrap up. So
I would love to say a question out loud. Sure. So good to see you, Mary Ellen.
Hi, Audra.
Now, one of the things I'm curious about, like a few years ago, I hosted a cultural competency. I actually used your materials, and it just, there's a lot of interest. I work with employers. There's a lot of interest on that. This is a professional group. I think there's a lot of interest. Can you talk about like two things? One is, if this is something I really care about, but I really don't have, it's not my subject matter. Like I'm not an expert in it. How can I support and create a conversation? That's part one of the question. Part two is the same thing, but how can I do it at different levels? Like if I am, I'm connected to a group and I'm not in their leadership, but I know this is important. I'm sure they would be interested. Is there something I can do to kind of like lead that conversation or put that idea out there? And then, you know, how do I support it when I'm not an expert?
In terms of facilitating cultural competency, or?
Yeah, or global citizenship, cultural competency, anything that's going to have us like, you know, we know our world is getting bigger and smaller at the same time, but are we prepared? Are we doing enough? Are we welcoming enough? Are we really taking advantage of all the talent that's out there? And how do I kind of support it and help people talk more?
Great question. And great segue. You just said talk more. And that's what I do. I use dialogue often as a tool to facilitate conversations around cultural competency and global citizenship and divisive topics. I've been trained with Essential Partners, a nonprofit based in Cambridge that uses a reflective dialogue framework. So I've found, whether it's in my classes or in my consulting, facilitating dialogue. So rather than, you know, me presenting on this is what global citizenship is, it's getting people talking, even if it's about divisive issues. So I think, you know, using dialogue techniques can help. I'm also, I'm a trained facilitator with Narrative 4. They use the story exchanges as a way to build empathy. So that's another tool that I use. But again, it's all around, you know, getting people together and having conversations, because I think we can learn a lot from each other. So dialogue is one way to do it. Another, you know, what I also do is bring in, so I'm still very connected with the refugee community in Rhode Island, and I'm on the board of a local organization. I teach global migration courses, but when I teach these courses or do cultural competency workshops, I always bring in a refugee guest speaker, because really they're the experts, right? They've lived the experience of coming to the United States. So I always have guest speakers, in particular, you know, if it's on refugee topics, bringing in refugee guest speakers to share their experiences. But I think engaging people in dialogue can be a really powerful way to talk about global citizenship and to have conversations about divisive topics. I hope that answered your question.
So if people want to get involved in like the refugee assistance, I mean, that sounds very exciting. And I think it would really make a big impact. And maybe, you know, even, you know, in Rhode Island or elsewhere, do you have resources on your website that can direct people to that? Or can you recommend how people could get involved in that?
Yeah, so there's various organizations in Rhode Island that assist refugees. So Dorcas International Institute, Women's Refugee Care, and I can send these links to you after Beth and Michaela to share with the group. Beautiful Day, Refugee Dream Center. So those are the organizations that come to mind. So there's quite a few organizations that assist newcomers in Rhode Island. And I can send those links to you to share out to the group if people are interested. I know from my experience, they're always looking for people to, I know for the organization that I serve on the board of, they're looking for people to serve as mentors to new refugee families. There's other ways to get involved as well, in terms, you know, if you want to donate items. Some of these organizations have events that they host to engage others in their work. So there's plenty of opportunities if people want to get involved or learn more about refugees in the Rhode Island community. So I can send out those links. I know Audra just put some in the chat too. Thank you, Audra.
Yeah. Another question. What about those purchases? How can I use my money to support global citizenship?
Excellent question. So, you know, like I said, it's not always, you know, just donating, but if that's something you want to do, is give back to different organizations through donations. I mean, like I said, there's so many organizations here locally that work with refugees. If you're interested in other causes, that's something I'm building up through my business. So if you go to my Instagram page and go to my link in my bio, I have one link to Asylum Access, which is an international refugee organization. And there's a link that shows how you can help them. And I'm going to be adding links as well. But if you're interested in more causes globally, like I said, I partner with this organization in Nepal, Empowerment Collective, and I'm going to be sharing a link in my bio for how to assist Empowerment Collective. So I have links in my bio if you are interested. But I think really, if you're interested in making a donation, it should, to be an active global citizen, it should be a cause that you're really passionate about, and maybe aligns with what your interests are. But check out my link in my bio, my Instagram page, for some global organizations that I partner with that you could check out, and maybe there are organizations that you'd be interested in supporting.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions?
I do want to point out, so actually, my current intern with Mary Ellen Lynch Consulting is Nathaniel Sandoval, who's a URI student, and he's here today. So I just want to say hello and thank you to, yeah, thank you to Nathaniel for supporting the work of Mary Ellen Lynch Consulting. But to further explain what it means to be a global citizen, because it's such a broad term, and it really, it's all about how we, engage with the world based on our unique strengths. But Nate, in one of our conversations, once said, when I asked him about global citizenship and leadership, he said, for him, leadership is helping others around you improve and enjoy what they are doing. And I loved that he said that, because again, it's going back to our strengths. And as a leader, it's important to build others up. And that's really what I'm trying to do through my consulting. So I love how we put it in that perspective. So thank you, Nathaniel.
That's great. And welcome, Nathaniel. That's awesome that you're an intern for Mary Ellen. We do have a question from Melissa. She said, for our engineering students who are preparing to study and work abroad through the URI program, which is a whole year, what are the top 3 skills or points of knowledge you would say are necessary for them to be considered culturally competent? And second question, what is the #1 hurdle you see in attaining a high level of cultural competency?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's where also the global citizen framework that I use in the classroom from Oxfam can help serve as a framework to prepare your students to travel abroad. But I think some critical skills are, building empathy. So being able to build relationships with the people they meet abroad. Adaptability is one skill under global citizenship framework in terms of being, adapting. I think these are skills that we all need, but that students are going to need for future careers as our world is changing, to be able to be adaptable and maybe find themselves working with people all over the world. I think, putting on my public speaking teacher hat, communication is key. And I tell my students, I know there's many surveys that say that communication is the top skill that employers are looking for today in college graduates. And so many of my students really are terrified to public speak, and I reinforce how important communication is, whether it's presenting in front of people, whether it's presenting yourself in an interview, but it's also our interpersonal communication and how we interact with others. So I think those are some skills that come to mind, but I think a global citizenship framework can help prepare students, those engineering students, for their work abroad.
That's a great point, and great answers that could help these students. We do have a question from Audra. She said, tell me more about Beautiful Day. Are they an organization I can support by making purchases?
Yeah, so Beautiful Day is actually an organization that I partner with. They're an amazing organization. The founder I used to work with at Dorcas International Institute. So basically, they provide job skills training to refugees in Rhode Island. And through the job skills training program, they make granola, and then Beautiful Day sells the granola. They also make coffee and other items as well. And the proceeds go back into the organization, supporting the job skills training for refugees. So it's an amazing program. But they also, through their branding and through their products, they educate people about the refugee crisis, because there's so much misinformation out there about refugees. So they also do a lot of education through their products. Amazing organization. So that's an organization that you're interested in partnering with. I can connect you with them. But you can support by, if you're a granola lover, they have amazing coffee from Burundi, amazing coffee. They have amazing granola and other products. They sell their products in some of the local stores and at some local farmers markets. So that's a way as well. If you're interested, I know Nathaniel, my intern, is a big advocate of mentoring, and I know mentoring has made a huge impact in his life. The organization, I know Beautiful Day is always in need of mentors, and Women's Refugee Care, the organization I'm on the board of, is always looking for mentors to really provide friendship to new refugees, because most often when they come, they don't know anybody here. So if you're interested in mentoring opportunities, I know Beautiful Day and Women's Refugee Care has opportunities if you're interested in more relationship building opportunities.
And can I have a follow-up on that one, Mary Ellen? Like, so if someone may, want to do this, do they need to speak the language? Is this something, or do most of the refugees know English when they come?
Great question. From my experience working with refugees, some refugees come with master's degrees, and then some refugees come with limited education. So it depends. So some refugees speak English, some are still learning language. So, but from my experience with these organizations, a prerequisite of speaking language, you don't need to. They, find ways. They have people who can help with translation services, and they're certainly working with refugees to help them learn the language. So you don't have to speak the language to be a mentor or help in other ways. No, but good question.
That's great.
I think we have two more questions. I received one. What's one thing that would surprise someone about the refugee resettlement process?
Great question. And so many things. I think a lot of people don't realize that refugees are invited here by the US government. And many refugees that I work with say that, they didn't choose to be a refugee. They fled because of the conditions in their home country, and they would prefer to stay in their home country, but the conditions were so dire that they were forced to flee. But there is a very, strict process for refugees to come to the United States. They have to apply. So any refugee here in the United States, came through an application and screening process overseas. And it takes, most refugees live in refugee camps for sometimes close to 20 years. It depends, 5, 10, I know refugees who were in camps for close to 20 years. So it's a long process, but it's a very strict screening process. And when they do, if they're lucky enough to be able to come to the United States, there's organizations like Dorcas, who are the resettlement agency, that welcomes them and helps them get set up and helps them find employment and connects them to other services like education and health. So it's a really, I think a lot of people don't realize some of that. So those are some, I remember when facilitating workshops with Dorcas and educating people about the process. A lot of people don't know that there's a large refugee community, right here in Rhode Island.
We have one more question. I think this might be our last question for the day, from Sierra. Sometimes it is easy to overlook things when you are so passionate. How do you use your privilege to make sure that you are empowering the communities you are working with, as well as making sure their needs are met?
Great question. So, what I do is in my workshops, in my work, like I mentioned, if I'm going to be talking about refugees or cultural competency, I bring in other experts. It's not just me giving a presentation. It's leaning on the people in my network who've lived through these experiences, or people that are coming from different cultures. So I try to be very, inclusive, with my work. So especially, with cultural competency, I always bring in, again, local experts, and often it's people from the refugee community to come and talk about their experience and their work, you know, on the ground in the field, working with the communities in here in Rhode Island. So that's one way that I do that, but that's a great question. So I'm always very mindful of that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for answering these questions. Like I said, we will send a follow-up email and we will include all the links Mary Ellen talked about. But I think, you know, if that's all the questions we have for today, you know, I'd like to thank Mary Ellen for doing this talk with everyone, and thank Beth for moderating. It's been a great talk. And yeah, I hope you all have a great day and a great St. Patrick's Day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Thank you.
Bye.